All right. Some things that I forgot to mention about this retreat. Um, One thing that was incredibly cool, and I hope I'll get to kind of suggest just how cool it was that for every thing that happened in either the mixed space or in the men's space, whatever happened on the mat was interpreted live by two incredible musicians who between them had 30 years of combined experience in making music, who had an entire podium with 25 different instruments or so. And they just picked the instrument according to the vibe of the person and the kind of work that they wanted to do, and then just made music like really moment to moment interpreting what was going on for this person. So you
So
didn't
like
just get like a
background music, like as it's going
uh,
on, or like
yeah, background music, yes, but not it was definitely not background. It was like an important part of the whole thing. Like it really set the vibe, you know. So you didn't just get like the in-person physical energy transmission from whatever was happening on the mat of that person. You also got an auditory transmission of equal strength, and of
holy
incredible
cow.
attunement. And this was so unique for each person and so well attuned to what was going on for each person. Like these, I mean, these weren't just musicians; they were also musicians who had done a lot of this sort of work themselves. So they had a lot of experience with attuning to people's emotional processes and being able to let those processes flow through them and then into music. So even no matter how intense it got, like we got like really angry drums, we got incredibly deep guitar work, you know, like um just incredibly like raw sounds that were coming from the music field. So it's just like the entire thing had an incredible extra layer to it.
That makes that kind of makes a lot of things fall into place for me because I
Huh.
like like in groups, I have a tendency to feel very disconnected and like my vibe is off and like I don't know how other people are thinking or feeling or whatever. And I feel like having that's kind of like a I don't know, like a signal for everyone, like this is
Mhm.
what we're feeling. That's kind of reading the room, but also like feeding back for anyone who's like missing it. I feel like that would keep me on track. Like I'd be like, oh, I know what we're feeling now. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah, definitely facilitated some extra attunement in the field.
Mm.
Although, let me come back to this after I've talked about the spaces, because in general, a big theme of the retreat was attunement and how to foster that in people, and some really cool things came out of that. Um, yeah, so yeah, anyway, it just that was part of it. Um, yeah, and not just intense music, also sometimes like very beautiful, slow, soft music, you know, all kinds of things. And in between the sessions that I mentioned and the sessions that I will mention, you know, there were these really intense experiences, but it wasn't just like wham, 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 you know, like there were only these sort of things. You also got breaks, you got incredible foods. There was a sauna that we go to. There's like a fireplace that was on in the evenings that people would gather around, play guitar songs around, you know. So there's like a lot of softness and time to kind of connect or take our own space on our own terms and on our own pacing. So like, um, yeah, there's a nice little ebb and flow between these intense sessions and then like calmer in betweens, plus some calmer evening sessions. The evening sessions were always more chill. I mentioned the belly to belly, which is of course, you know, has its own kind of relaxedness. There was a primal play session, which is more playful. There was one evening just like a cuddle slash sauna space. So not in the same space that you know would have been fun, but it wasn't. Um, yeah, so there was a lot of spaciousness as well throughout the retreat. The next space that I want to talk about is a quite powerful one, probably the strongest that I've seen, plausibly ever. Not in the sense that it was strong for me, because it was about the topic of race. So a trigger warning for that as a theme. And I'm white, so I've never, been the victim of much racism at all. Um, Probably not of any. And so for me, it wasn't necessarily a moving experience for me, but it was a very powerful experience for the people involved and for all the people in the field who resonated with it. When I say field, by the way, I use field to kind of mean the energetic field of the group. So like the thing that we were all tapping into, so to speak, that we were all connected to at all times. The main organism that was happening, so to speak. Okay. I think this happened on the fifth day, where one man, a white, is, well, I won't mention his culture, but for confidentiality reasons, but a white man um, had been roomed with a black man and found this difficult. And at one point, we were in a men's space with only the men, and he basically, he started talking and saying like, this is fucked up. I hate myself for feeling this way. I know it's not okay, but like he really tried to put a lot of disclaimers there. I needed some encouragement from the field, like this is welcome. And then he said like, but like um I can't recall the exact words he used. Something like I feel uh, constrained or scared or like a huge tension around this black man that he had been roomed with. Um, because of his blackness. And, you know, this was something that is very taboo, of course. And the man knew this. Like he had a lot of difficulty being open about this. Um, but it was what was alive for him. And that's sort of the guiding principle in the group, like what is alive in the group. And this is still very alive in him. Um, so he brought this up, scared as he was, and already um, kind of the black man in question, we were all kind of like, "Phew, like, is this okay with this guy that someone just being racist to his face?" Um, but the black man, I'm gonna have to constantly refer to them as the black man and the white man because I can't name them. Um, that's how it
Sure.
is.
That's necessary in this context.
Yes. Um, the black man kind of was basically incredibly grateful already at this point. He was frozen silent with his eyes closed, and then he just went like with his hands in prayer in front of him, kissed that, and was like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, man," because he had felt that this white man had been kind of avoiding him, been uneasy and uncomfortable around him, and this man was like 50, 60 years old. He has felt racism his whole life, has felt people be uncomfortable around him because of his skin his whole life. But it's so rarely made explicit that it is because he's black. You always have to sort of wonder, like, was it something that I did? Was it something about me, or is it just my skin? And so to finally hear explicitly from someone like, yeah, it is your skin for me. Like it is that caused this, for him was already just a huge relief. And he, I mean, he was a very kind man, a very powerful man, and really a jovial, wise, strong man in general. Very, like I admire him in general. Also before this space, but also in this space, he really had a lot of like this open heartedness towards this white man and seeing that like, yeah, this is vulnerable for you, and I get that you don't endorse this and like don't mean this, that there's just this part of you that feels this um that is vulnerable to share, and yeah, you appreciated that openness and that vulnerability. and recognize the courage in that. So that was already quite beautiful as an interaction between these two men.
Yeah.
Um, but Mary, that was only the beginning because because they hadn't even gotten onto the mat yet. There hadn't been any work done, so to speak. And um, for the white man, he had kept kind of disclaiming, he had kept being like, "Oh, I don't actually, I don't fully feel this way, but just some part of me, whatever." And we were all kind of like, "Man, like you're not, you're very afraid of it still, like we can see this." And he knew this too as himself. Um, and it wouldn't do to kind of leave him be in that fear. And from the black man's side, there was also the sense of like, do like your this part of him is getting mentioned, but you're not like seeing it yet. So they were both invited onto the mat, and this I think at this point I was also very impressed by the facilitator, who I haven't really mentioned yet, but brief tangent, because the facilitator I will talk about more later, but I'm incredibly impressed by him, and his role was basically to do space definition, space holding, space channeling. His goal was to see what was going on in people and to see what might they need, what what is it that is alive for them, to recognize what they were hiding as well, and to kind of make sure that the energy was flowing in the group and would go in productive directions, which is a lot of feeding for a man to do. Anyway, I'll talk about that later. But
Yeah,
in
that's
this
a lot of stuff.
case, yeah, like just let all of that into the nervous system. Um, but I'll talk about it later. For now, suffice to say that, like at this point, we were talking about racism, like one of the most charged topics you can imagine, and then this guy was admitting to being racist to this black man's face, and you're kind of like, well, is this okay? Like, is this not taboo? Like, are we gonna allow this? Not in the sense of like we shouldn't allow this, but just in the sense of like, oh, we're gonna go here as a space. Are we ready for this, everyone? Um, and we were. But what I found was really incredible about his facilitator is that he recognized that, yeah, the space could hold this. The space could hold this intensity, could hold this authenticity, could hold this tabooness. He just let it happen. He just invited them both onto the mat. Wasn't worried about it, even though he knew that like this is gonna get intense, and it's gonna deeply move some people. But that's okay. It works in the vibe. Um, so they were invited onto the mat, and at this point, the white man was encouraged to stop hiding that racist part of him and instead to really let it out, to really inhabit that racist shadow of him. Like he talked about to us about it. So basically, like he'd grown up, like ever since he was like a 5-year-old boy, like until he was 15, it was just completely the default in his culture that black men are scary, dangerous, bad. Like they're the stereotypical, like archetypical even example of just bad people you don't shouldn't trust, like strangers. Like if you see a black man on the street, like don't come near him. Like it's dangerous, this sort of thing. Which, if you hear that from 5 to 15, that's gonna impact you. And that was still really alive for him. Like he still had this sort of like really a fear of the black man. And he wasn't showing that. So he was encouraged to let that fear into his body and to move with it and to let it express itself without him being an intermediary between that part and the space. So to just really let it out. And with we also checked in with the black man, and he was also completely cool with this. He was like, yeah, let's fucking do this, which is great. So this white man started to really kind of get into, and this is kind of the most powerful or like deepest shadow work I've ever seen someone do. Like he really got into this racist caricature of a person, like his movement getting kind of wooden or like rickety or whatever, however you want to call it. His expression got really like judgmental, fearful, like if you would come close to him, then that he would punch you or something. Like really like this sort of like distant fearfulness. Um, And he started really speaking just from the truth, that part of him, that scary part of him. He also asked, like, can I say the N words? And the black man was like, absolutely, sure. So he also did that. I won't repeat it here, but that was part of it. Um, and he got really intense with that fear. He really said things like he looked into this man's eyes and was like, "Get out of my fucking house," like this sort of thing, like "Get out, like get the fuck out of here, leave me alone," like this sort of thing, which is, it's quite a lot, quite intense. Um, and at this point, the black man, he was just like really jovially having it. He was like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, like get this energy, get this out of there," really kind of playing along with it. Um, but then he was invited also, like like you're dealing with it, you're handling it absolutely, but you also kind of you're it's not like he was joking about it, but he was remaining in the sense of like humor slash like activated energy about it. But this theme of racism, like this racist part that he was seeing, had obviously been the cause of much hurt for him throughout his entire life. This part in people, the part that was scared of him, and he was invited also, with the white man's agreement which he was invited to let that part of himself out there as well, and to meet that racist shadow part of this white man. So he did that, and Mary, this was, I won't be able to replicate it here, but it was very, very intense. He basically started with just a high-pitched scream of like this pain of just being so poorly judged, in his entire life for such a superficial thing, but so harshly judged. And just all of that pain, he put it into that scream and screamed it out, like high pitched, raw, ugly, you know, really getting into it. And you could feel that pain in him more strongly than I've ever, seen that sort of pain in anyone. And he talked about, the racism that he experienced throughout his life, like as a, um, well, I won't mention many of the specifics, but it was a lot, and it was really difficult from when he was a 4-year-old boy. I mean, 4-year-old boy, go figure. Um, and like there was one thing where, for instance, the racist part of the white man and said like, "Oh, like I feel like you're like I can't even say the N word, right? Like you're tightening my mouth, like you're controlling it. Like what the fuck is that?" And then this black man said like, "Well, like I'll fucking tell you, like I have two daughters who are black, and they won't let me say the N word either. Like it's not just you there." Um, and he also mentioned like I'm 6 years old. I dealt with this fucking shit my whole life. At this point I can deal with it. You wanna act this out. You wanna put it out there. Fine, give it to me. I can handle it. But don't you fucking dare show this to my children. Like he was like, I'll if you make my children suffer for this, I'll fucking kill you. Because he had these two daughters who were like 12, 13 years old, and he was so sick that after a lifetime of having to deal with racism, and it's still being there, that now his own daughters had to deal with this, his own children, and that he couldn't protect them from it. And you could see that pain in him as a father, this sense of so deeply wanting to protect his children from this the thing that he was seeing in this man, but being unable to, and just how much he would be willing to fight, to put his own life on the line to fight for them against this pain, was just one of the most powerful and beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. To see that willingness to fight expressed there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the tie-in. Like I think a lot of times we think about racism as being kind of an isolated thing and something. So like a lot of white people are like, it's not something I've ever experienced. I've never felt any racism, and it creates this, I don't know, distance and almost lack of empathy.
Yeah.
But then like it's it's interwoven in everything, like children, family, like, you know,
Yeah.
and I feel like that is something, I don't know, and I'm wondering if like how the white man responded, like I don't know if he has children or whatever, but if it's like, oh, it's something like, you know, this is about protecting children, like this is about like, you know, that kind of relationship. I'm wondering how that resonated with other people in the group.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would have resonated really strongly just if it hadn't been around the children either. Like you really saw this man in his full humanity, you know, like there's like you can't doubt that he is as fully a human as any of us, you know, like there's no doubt about that. Um, and I mean, of course there isn't, of course you shouldn't be loud about it, but it's still different to really see that in such a strong way. Um, and but definitely I think it being a familial thing and also just seeing not just him, yeah, wanting to protect himself, but also this like so human, so such a honorable trait of like this love that a parent has for their child. Um, that's such a core human thing and such a core morality thing. That to see it expressed so strongly, I'm sure made a huge impact. So I can't say what precisely moved this man in what ways, but I can say that at the end of it, you know, he ultimately they both um, you know, at the end of this sort of session, they'd met each other, they'd seen each other, they'd embraced each other, they'd really recognized each other in this beautiful humanity. And then once they had sat down again outside of the mat, you know, this white man was like, yeah, like I, I really felt your pain. I've seen it. I felt it in me, and I know it now. And I know so strongly that I never want to make anyone suffer in that way in my life. Like it's just this entire sense of this racism that he felt, as far as I can tell, as far as he expressed it, it was just gone at this point, just transformed because he was so certain now, like this spirit isn't fucking worth it. Like I've seen the pain it inflicts. I've seen the beautiful people it inflicts this on, you know. I've seen their power, their beauty, their honesty, their pain. Um, at this point, he was just fully on the side of this man, of this black man, which was also beautiful to see. I mean, yeah, like race is such a heated topic. Like I never knew that a space was this like was possible. That that you can take this tension and be honest about this in the right space, of course, in the right space, with the right
Yeah.
people. But still, it is possible to really transform that kind of latent racism into a real sense of I am fucking on your side and I will be there until I die. Yeah. Which, yeah, was very powerful to see in this man and was really powerful for both of them to receive. Um, yeah, just all in all, like an incredible, strong human experience. It's rare in general to see like genuine, strong emotions in people. It's even rarer to see them done in a safe container. But in this case, like all throughout, even though it was so intense and it got so sort of interpersonal and personal, it was completely safe all throughout. Like there was no doubt about it. Everyone felt that it was right and that it wouldn't possibly go wrong. It was just like this beauty of the realness of people that you cannot but feel this respect for. And like it's not something that you can deny. It's not something you can be weird about. Like it's right there. You can see it, and both people can recognize it. And only beautiful things can sort of come forth from that once the people are in the right space, which they were.
Wow.
Yeah, so really beautiful experience, like something that I wouldn't have known was possible until I saw it.
That sounds so profound and intense.
Yeah.
And so rare. Like it I wanna think that these kinds of things can be kind of recreated, that like the people that were there and saw any of these things happen, that they can like kind of expand that out into their lives, um and and stuff. And I guess I'm wondering, like, what do you think the possibility of that is? Like, does it feel like something that like will spread out from this
Mm,
event and events like it, or do you feel like it can kind of only happen in these places?
mm. You mean this specific workshop, like on the topic of race, or in general?
Any of it? Any
Any
of
of
it?
it.
Mm.
Um, for sure. I think it will echo out. Um, yeah, I'll talk about this more later, but there is, um, yeah, let me see. Because I wanna talk about attunement. Excuse me,
Okay.
attunement later.
Mhm.
Um, but in general, I think, um, how to put it? Like, like I mentioned, for instance, with the men devouring space, right? Like that sort of thing. That's an imprint of an empowered female sexuality that a lot of the women will take with them home into their own lives. And um, similarly, I think something like this space about race, um, like I myself have been, privy to a lot of pain from people of color. Like it's all over the internet, it's all in culture. Like I've read a lot about it. Also, I mean, I read it itself, expressions of it. Um, but it still brings a new level of realness of like knowing what it's about, of being able to feel into it from having seen it in a person. And I think this is something that, and it's also part of why like it's not something that can be expressed in writing. Like you have to see it in the person themselves, see how it impacted them to be able to really feel that. And until you see that, I just think that writing is a beautiful medium, but an impoverished one when it comes to this sort of thing, like to these really strong and deeply held emotions. Um, and um, yeah, I think I can't imagine that the space did not go home with a greater sense of, um, I want to say like being anti-racist, or uh, like just like they must have gone home with a greater sense of understanding people of color. I should hope. Um, I know I did. And I would be incredibly surprised if that wasn't the case for many other people.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing question. I'll talk about this more later, but it's an ongoing question of like, how do we bring these things home and into
Right.
our own lives? Yeah, yeah. Let's still feel alive at the end of this session, and let's talk about that, because it's something that I also, really want to figure out for myself. How do I what do I do with this? Like
Yeah.
it was all just an incredible experience, this whole retreat, and now where do
Yeah.
I go with that? So,
Right.
well, part of it is talking about it for me, and hopefully spreading it a little bit through this.
Yeah.
Uh, Um, I want to talk about another space that happened, which was, how do I say this? Because this was a space that felt very personal to me, even though it only barely involved me. What happened was that each morning we were in a little pod. Yeah, I forgot to mention this. The structure was also each morning we would meet in a pod of 4 people total of your own gender, and spent half an hour just talking about how are you doing? What's the life for you? You know. And in this case, in the morning of the 4th or 5th day, I um, had heard from one of my brothers in that pod, a story that, that was a life on him. Like he felt frozen. He um, had had something that triggered a story around that frozenness. He'd sort of been distant, not really in touch with his heart. You could see it too. Like it was kind of like he had like, I want to say like a sort of like a fearfulness to him, not like a weakness, but definitely a sense of like his heart hasn't thought, yeah, there's no possibility of it melting into softness here because something is blocking him there. And he was very afraid to talk about it, but he did mention it. And then he said like, yeah, I want to bring this into the group, but I'm very scared to do so. So if one of you could, give me a little extra push, yeah, please. So when the space came for us to do circle work in a mixed group, I uh, I basically told the group like, hey, yeah, like I heard a brother of mine this morning who needed an extra push, and I would like to invite him into the space now. Um, and it felt very resonant that was me who could make that possible for him, because as it turned out, the space was also incredibly meaningful for me. So he, I gave the space to him, and he talked to the group about, he was something like 50 something. He talked to the group about how when he was 12, he had been kind of, there was a girl who liked him and who went up to him and was like, hey, do you wanna like do this? And he was sort of like, no, I'm not into you. Like he wasn't into girls at that time yet. He hadn't really developed his sexuality yet. Um, and then this girl basically spent a year, day in, day out, sort of stalking him, like constantly seeking his attention in some way, but in a very hot and cold manner. Like one day she would be really trying to get like cozy with him or really trying to be very sweet and love dosing him. And then the next day she would mock him in front of the entire class, like this sort of thing. Um, so for him, he feels like his wires around women really got crossed there before he even developed any kind of sense of sexuality or any kind of liking women. Like he didn't feel safe with women. He would freeze up. He would receive love and expect mockingness like the next day. Like he felt unsafe in his body for his whole life since then. Like we're talking decades. He also mentioned, and this I found very brave, like he mentioned to the group, that he had also not managed to get hard with women, for instance. And it's not a biological thing because he got morning erections just fine, but it was like a psychological thing of just feeling that unsafety. Um, and yeah, so he was stuck, he was frozen, he had this confusion inherent in his system, in his nervous system, in his body. Um, and what had happened was that a woman at this retreat had kind of tried to get a little close to him, and that hadn't, yeah, that had triggered him, and he had kind of taken his distance, but then hurt the woman a little bit, and the sort of like the sort of thing that kept happening that he didn't mean, but also didn't know how to deal with, and whenever it came up, he would get too triggered. So it's this whole thing. So it was very real life for him at the time. Um, yeah, so he talked about this to us there in his frozenness, and was invited onto the space, onto the mat. And what happened was that he um, first it was asked like which of the women feels a resonance of this and would like to help him. And then he picked 3 women of those to kind of sit on the corners of the mat, one facing him, two on his side. And then the idea was that they would come to him very slowly, one by one, because the story that the facilitator had about this was, which he had about trauma in general, which is when things happen. Um, let's see, what was it again that he said? Too much, too soon, too quickly. One of those three or any combination. So to ensure that that wouldn't happen now, that he could get an imprint of what it is like to be safe with a woman, it was requested that these women would approach him very slowly. And he, in turn, would remain in touch with his own system and see when does he go from openness to that closeness, that frozenness. Whereas when does that switch happen? So the women came close to him one by one, slowly, quite slowly, as he sat there on that mat, and they made their way over to him. But the second woman had just made contacts when the facilitator kind of asked the man, like, "Hey, where are you at right now?" And the man noticed, "Yeah, I'm frozen again. I'm dissociated. Yeah, okay, I'm not here. I'm not with this touch that I'm receiving." So even that much slowness wasn't enough. So we redid it again. The women went back to their corners, and this time they really, like, one at a time, as slowly as possible. This woman made her way over to him. And this was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Like beforehand there, it had been slow, but it had still been sort of normal. But now there was just such an incredible spaciousness in terms of there was just no rush at all in her movements. There was no sense of having to make it even to a physical connection with him anytime soon. So even though the interaction between them was the only thing that was happening there was such a slowness there that was allowed to take place in it. Such a goallessness almost. Um, and it was all mute, of course, like there were no sounds. And what it expressed to me was because they held a very intense eye connection to kind of see, like, both to communicate, hey, I am safe. Do you feel safe? And to try and get a sense of, like, I am going to come a little bit closer. How does it impact you? You know? And it really, there was such a sort of, just a really deep and slow love and care that was communicated from her to him. I want to say, like, a very pure, not even human in nature. I want to say it's like an animal that sees another animal in pain and just wants to take care of it. Like this sort of pureness, like not even with a ulterior motive or anything, just this pure sense of I see your pain and I am here to make as much space and slowness for it as possible to help you. So it's very pure, and in this deep loving slowness she moved closer to him. And there's normally some sense of love as being like an active thing. Like, I love you, so I do something for you. I love you, so I'm passionate. I love you, so I'm intense. In this case, it was I love you, so I will be slow, which is so unusual in a lot of ways, but it's so beautiful. Just like a deep patience for this person, for this man. And she got slower and slower with a deep care all throughout, embedded in her every movement, until, yeah, they touched and then they embraced slowly, very, very slowly. And first sunk into this embrace, you know, kind of deeply feeling into that safety and that warmth until that had landed, and only then turning that into movement and a deeper, more connected embrace. So every part of it was so unrushed. There was no part of it where it felt like, oh, we've arrived, so now back to usual tempo. No, it's just, yeah, this deep sense of spaciousness in the energy.
I love this so much, and it really resonates with me because like and the you mentioned like animals, there was a kind of animal energy, and I feel like it is like kind of the idea of taming a wild animal. And like I've heard people, someone who's very shy or has been traumatized or something like that, people will
Yeah,
describe you as, getting to know you is like taming a wild animal kind of thing. And
yeah,
people
like a
have,
herd animal or something.
yeah, people have said that about me, and I'm like, yeah, that feels right.
Yeah,
And like the times that I have, sometimes there was like a particular trauma thing that I wanted to sort of get past, and if I could find a way to do it slowly, either a person who was willing
yeah,
to like go at my speed, which is like so slow, or when I'm just like not rushing myself, like if I can just be slow and gentle with myself while I'm working through it, like that's how I do it. And it's actually, I found it to be more reliably effective than almost anything. Like that's such
yes,
an important, just slowness, like
yeah,
is so important. And it's just, people just don't even know like how to do that, or that it could be beneficial. Everyone's like, just do it. Like be brave
yeah,
and do it. And it's like,
yeah.
no, sometimes that is not the solution. So I love this activity. It's it's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean there's so much I can say about this, and I will. Um um yeah, like I mean, so for starters, it was the slowest intimacy I've ever seen between two people, slower than any that I've had myself as well. And I've had slow intimacy, and like you, like I, I also really love slowness, and in fact, this is something that I'm very grateful for, which is um, so part of why this moved me so much is that I relate a lot to the sense of being frozen in your body and feeling unsafe around people. Like I used to have that so much, and especially around women, around sexuality, just like a lot of anxiety in my body. But like a lot of like, oh, can I do things, or like, can I be loved? Like just a lot. Um, and I feel very lucky as um in like being a straight man, that like the first person that I eventually had sex with was a girl who recognized that I needed things to go very slowly. And across like 2.5 months, we met like every week, and were intimate before we even had sex. It was like a long time, and it really tested her patience. Like she would joke about that, but there was always a sense of like, no, yeah, like I can take my time. That she allowed me to do that, and that was so meaningful, and it really couldn't have happened any other way. And I know that for myself, like when I'm in intimate context with people, like there's often this sense of like, first of all, like as a man, like I can sometimes feel a sense of, oh, but if I don't show you my passion or my desire or something, like I don't want you to like think that it's not there, or I don't want you to get bored with me or whatever. Like I can have that fiery energy, and I don't want to be misunderstood as not being capable of that fire. Like I have that. Um, but I would also like if I can feel safe in that, like that I don't have to be fast or lose you. Yeah, then I love that slowness. But it's difficult to get that kind of guarantee, so to speak, beforehand, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah. I've kind of in practice what I do is I do try to kind of sacrifice that guarantee, so to speak, for slowness because I feel like sex that is entered into too quickly tends to be messy somehow versus sex that is entered into more slowly. Like I've never regretted slowness, even when it hasn't, resulted in sex. Like it's always felt
Yeah.
like, yeah, we needed that slowness anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And there's this kind of just epidemic of urgency, especially when
Mhm.
it comes to
Mhm.
sex and like new relationships and things like that.
Yeah.
Like everyone's like the opportunity is gonna pass. You're gonna miss it, and it's like it's it's so much better, and it means so much more, and it's so much more likely to last if you give it as much time as it needs.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It allows for people to fit into what feels right, what feels alive actually. Like those such feel good. I I once had an interaction with a girl at an Tennessee festival. Where and I don't wanna give the wrong image of myself. I was already going pretty slowly, I think. And I think I have a pretty good view of whether I am or not. But in this case, she still kept asking me like, go more slowly, like a bunch of times. Um, and each time it was such a nice way of getting out of this framing of like, oh, where can I get like where am I gonna be able to get to with this girl? And to just be like, oh, I can leave that for like in the future, and just right now enjoy what we're already having. And each time it's like a reminder to like step back into the now, into what was already there, and how beautiful and pleasurable that was already.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so each time I was like, yeah, I really appreciate it. There's
yeah,
definitely a part of me that's like, oh, but like, oh, I wanna like I wanna get a little more intense here. But I mean, that part is also like it's playful. It can be kept at bay, and then enjoys that sort of waiting game. But also another part of me is just like really appreciating that sense of like, yes, let's be present. Let's be slow here. Let's really feel into this connection. And it's one thing that's remarkable is that you can always sort of go more slowly to be with the moment more. And if that connection is deep enough, then it can bear that slowness. And in fact, it will be really beautiful.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So in this case, too, like with this woman on the mat, as it happened, the man happened to be facing with his back towards me. So when the woman embraced him, it was almost FCC was embracing me. Like I was like when she was looking at him, it was almost like she was looking at me, and I could sort of. It was like I could receive like 90% of what she was giving this man. I could receive myself, and I felt incredibly moved by this. Also because as a man, it can feel vulnerable to say that sometimes I need slowness. Like sometimes I feel unsafe. Like this whole like this whole masculinity ideal of like, oh, you're totally fine and bad, like you're all cool and you can create space for the woman, but you don't need space or anything. And it's like
Right.
that's more me now, but it definitely didn't used to be, and it's not fully me. Um, so to see that a man can express needing that so strongly and to still be given so much love organically from a woman who heard his story and who resonated with it incredibly strongly, who afterwards she told me like that she because I went up to her and talked to her about it. She told me like, oh, the moment I heard him talk, I was like, I need to be there for him. Like I feel this man so deeply, and I feel such love for him. Like I need to be able to be there. She told me that like if she hadn't been asked to as one of the three women to come onto the match, she would have barged on there herself just because she felt it so strongly. So it's also like one of those sort of magic little retreat moments that she was chosen indeed. And it just meant so much to me, Mary, that to see a woman give so much love and care to a man in his weakness, in his pain, in his unsafety, and to still recognize him as human and to want to give him this love. Yeah, that really, really, really landed in me and really moved me. Like I wasn't the recipient of it, but I feel like I experienced it, all the same.
I'm feeling moved just hearing about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really beautiful. Yeah. And she also mentioned, like, when I told her, like, yeah, it's a little weird because we haven't talked before, but I feel like you gave me this already. And she was like, no, 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 I meant that. Like I meant it not just for him, but like for all men. Yeah. And afterwards, what was resonant was that a woman in the space mentioned that she had felt more aroused than she'd ever felt in her whole life, witnessing this slow intimacy between these people. And she was so surprised, like she felt it physically in her body, in her sex, um, in a completely new way, where, I don't know her story and she didn't elaborate on it so much, but I can absolutely imagine like that it resonated with so many people that sex had always been quite fast, you know, a little bit too much, a little bit too fast, maybe a little too soon. Um, and that so few of us have ever seen it happen in the way that it should happen, rightly, or experience that. So
Yeah.
yeah, so to see that organically blossom out of the field in these two people in front of us was, yeah, honestly one of the most beautiful things I've experienced. Yeah, I'm like tearing up a little talking about it, thinking about it.
Me too.
Yeah, it's such an amazing space. I just love to know that that's possible. Yeah.
I feel like it's it's really important in so many areas too, like not just sexual areas. Like in my teaching of high school kids, like so
Yeah.
many, and really like boys more than girls, like had difficult, maybe even traumatic experiences with adults and especially teachers, and kind of going slow and giving them time. Like I don't push them to do too much because I was teaching languages, so which is kind of a scary thing anyway for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
it's like just going slow as a teacher, they eventually find their curiosity and they, come out and they're ready to do it. Um,
Yes.
and I've seen so many teachers just do it. You just have to do it now, and that's just making it worse. But that kind of slowness gives people the power and the agency to come at it because they're ready to do it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it can just be applied to all aspects of life.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, I feel it so strongly because like um um yeah, I feel like until people are ready for something, like then it's gonna be frozen. But once they're ready, they're capable of such beauty and aliveness, like also in this man. Um, the space ended, and the second woman had only just had time to start touching him. Like I mentioned, there were three women. The third woman had never even got a chance to approach him because that's how slow it went. Um, and um, but because it had gone at a pace that felt right for him, that allowed him to meld into it and to really feel into it. He went from deeply frozen and stuck and confused to really feeling that safety first, and then from there feeling that, starting to feel that joy and pleasure. And now at the end of that process, he was able to embrace this woman with joy and with aliveness and return the love. I mean, like the second woman and the third woman, and then the third woman he was able to be playful and sexual with, like a little bit, like sort of flirty. And it was such a 180 from what he'd been capable of before. Like, this is not like he wasn't an unattractive man by any means, but you wouldn't have seen him flirting. And now to see him feel so comfortable in his sexuality afterwards, like, even though it had not been a sexual exercise necessarily, but because he'd just been so allowed to open, all that, whatever had kept him stuck had dissolved, had disappeared, melted away, and what remained was a beautiful aliveness in him, um, which is just beautiful to see. And it was so healing for him, so transformational. And it's just like, man, like the whole thing was like 45 minutes, like you give a man the right space for not even an hour and you can transform him. That's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's just incredible, and the fact that we're not doing this all the time with everyone, it's just like, like, what are we even trying?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, just the fact that these things are possible and seeing it happen with your own eyes it's really inspiring for me. And, yeah, and also, like, I've talked to him since, and he's just mentioned, like, the effect remains. He's retained that openness. Like, he feels so much safer in his life now. Like, even a month later, he feels more open around women. Even strangers seem to treat him way better. Like, something in his energy has changed. That just so many things are more beautiful. And all it took was these 45 minutes.
Oh my God,
Yeah,
I love that so much.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. It was amazing. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've mentioned this throughout, but what I love about this entire modality of circle work is things that are alive for you are always alive for multiple people in the space. Like, these topics are so universal. There's always someone that resonates in some way. It resonates in different ways. So, for instance, right, like I mentioned, for this space, it resonated for the people in the space, but it also resonated for me as, like, receiving what this man had received. And it resonated for this woman who mentioned that she'd been aroused. Like, that's a completely, I want to say, like, unexpected resonance, because it's not something that was necessarily part of the intention of the space. And yet it was still very strong and meaningful to her as its own experience. And I have no doubt that it impacted many people in their own ways. Like, it's all the sort of healing that is done in the group. Like, even if it's individual healing, it is also group healing. Which, if you do a week of that, it's incredible. You know, how many things get touched on, how many things get moved through, and seeing that, like, the healing of any person is the healing of you. Yeah,
It's so gorgeous.
yeah. I there's a few more spaces that I want to talk about. We have like an hour, right?
Yeah, almost an hour.
Let's just see.
Okay.
Um, the vibe of this space is quite different, and I'm wondering how I want to segue this. Would feel too strong to go right from one to the other. As an intermezzo, a minor space created by one man as part of circle work. I think in the men's space, this was, where he went onto the mat and did something that was part like interpretive dance, like around kind of his fire and around his sexuality, and he slowly undressed himself to us until he stood there naked. And he basically, what he did was he reclaimed the power and the beauty of his own sex, of his cock. Saying like he's felt ashamed of it because he felt that it was maybe a little small. And then he dispelled that and was like, but it is beautiful. Or he was, this is a, no, for confidentiality, I won't say that. He also mentioned like having premature ejaculation sometimes, and he, claimed that, and he was like, and it is still a beautiful cock, and it is still, I still love it. I still love it for the pleasure. I still love what it can give me, love what it can give women, all these things he expressed, and he stood there, full-bodied, proud, open-hearted, open-shouldered, open-chested, with an open pelvis to all of us, and kind of just like reclaiming that glory of his sex, which was very beautiful, was really cool.
So
Um,
awesome.
yeah, like both like, oh, I love that for him, and like inspirational, and like really resonating. Like, yeah, like it is beautiful, it is powerful. Um, yeah, it can be free of shame, and it deserves to be like this sort of thing. So yeah, these are, and like in a kind of like a bit of a fire energy as well. Not like the stereotype of like Alcoholics Anonymous, like a sort of shameful, like, oh yeah, like, but I like my penis. No, it is such a like I fucking love this thing. It's mine and I'm here for it, like that sort of energy. Um, so that's really great. Yeah, just wanted to mention that. Um,
I love things like that. That they like because it's such a weird, and I wonder about this too, like in a community setting, it's like wanting kind of external sort of affirmations and
like
reassurances,
validation.
and also kind of letting it come from within, and like finding that balance between
Yeah,
internal and the external.
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, which is also part of why it's like more than almost any space I've been in like I've been to a lot of spaces, more than in almost anything I've seen. Here, everything felt unforced. People's reactions were genuine and authentic and allowed. There was never any point where we had to clap, There was never any point where we had to be kind. Like all of the love that we shared within the group was authentic and organic and self-chosen. There was never any case where a specific person, almost never, unless it was about the person, like in every space, almost never was a specific person invited onto the mat. You led your own love, so to speak. Um, yeah, which really helped all of this land with people.